Welcome back, City Builders. Kodiak the Kodiak here. This week's video, I will be completely faceless. I just don't have a way to properly record my face with my voice and sync it up properly and quickly, and I just don't have a lot of time. And anyways, we're here to cover the news. It's fine. So in the background of today, we'll have some gameplay footage of me playing Cities Skylines 2 on one of my cities that I was building on my Twitch stream, which you can find a link to down in the description during the subathon that we did for the launch. I have about 50 hours in the game at this point, and I have a pretty good understanding, I think, of a lot of the mechanics in the game, and I'm absolutely loving it. I'm having an absolute blast. I totally get why all of the creators were basically saying, yeah, I'm never touching Cities Skylines 1 again. It is just chock full of cool, new, awesome stuff, and I'm having an absolute ball. That being said, the launch was not perfect, especially not for a lot of people who maybe had some alternate expectations of the game. As of right now, it is sitting at a 55% positive review rating on Steam. That being said, if you change the playtime to an hour, you actually will end up getting a 71% positive review rating of the game. And if you read any of the reviews from people who have played the game for at least an hour, you'll see that a lot of them are saying the same things. The bones are there. The core framework of Cities Skylines 2 is really good, but performance issues are truly plaguing this game right now. I think on top of that, a lot of people have different expectations in terms of performance. I think people expected a certain benchmark of level of performance, whereas Colossal Order has even stated that their performance benchmark and target for the game is only going to be 30 FPS. I don't think it helped either that the default settings in Cities Skylines 2 were maxed out pretty high and had some pretty significant performance impacts for not a lot of visual gain. On launch day, I followed modder TDW's performance guide, and I went from 40 FPS in the menu to 140 FPS in the menu. I'm sure seeing just 40 FPS in the menu probably scared a lot of people, and I think that's the reason why you see a lot of reviews change completely if you just select the option to say, have they played this for more than an hour? Now, I think that's a little bit on Colossal Order's fault. They should not have had default settings set the way they had, especially when obviously they were being transparent about the fact that, hey, this game's not going to be fully optimized at launch, but you would think maybe they would have some default settings set so that way people weren't just blasted with 30 FPS in the menu screen. I think that scared a lot of people away and caused the massive review bomb at launch. That being said, when you change those settings, I'm on recommended specs and I have not really dipped below 60 FPS, and I have about a 50,000 city. Now, I don't know what that's going to be like once I get up to 100,000, but as of right now, I have been feeling really good about performance. Now, I get not everyone has an enthusiast gaming PC like myself, so I guess I'm just kind of oblivious to the performance issues because I was able to change those few settings at launch and get really good performance consistently ever since then. I also didn't have anybody pop into my Twitch stream really complaining about performance issues either. I find this whole situation very strange because you have a ton of people review bombing the game, screaming about how bad performance is, but everyone who popped into my Twitch stream during the subathon who played the game said, yeah, I'm not getting that good of FPS, but it's tolerable, it's doable. Now, I've also been experiencing some incredibly rare crashes, as well as performance dips. As I said in a lot of my videos, I did a subathon for the launch of Cities Skylines 2, and every day around the 10-hour mark, I had to restart my gaming computer because I was doing a 2-PC setup, thank God. And the reason I had to do that was because right around the 10-hour mark, every single day, it just seemed like my computer took all the load off the GPU and threw it all onto the CPU, and I started getting about half the frames I normally would. And then I would restart the game and I would go back to the normal frames I had. Not really too sure what's going on there. It's really strange. Even if I restarted the games, I don't know if it's my computer or what, but then I was also getting some crashes every once in a while too around that time as well. The game would go to autosave and then everything would just lock up and then it would blue screen. But that only really happened after really long play sessions and around autosaves, so I really didn't lose much of anything when they happened. And I think that's a really good point to kind of hammer in on here, is that I don't know. I guess I would just rather have these performance issues than something game breaking. Like, I haven't really noticed or felt anything in the actual gameplay experience that's really changing or harming my gameplay experience. Like, there's no real broken mechanics that completely and functionally ruin everything from the gameplay experience. Like, there's no game breaking bugs. It's just, yeah, I'm not really getting super great FPS. And in a genre like a city builder, I don't really need it. Now, GamersNexus did also do a benchmark and optimization guide for Cities Skylines 2, and Steve did leave with the fact that this is one of the most unoptimized games that he's ever played. And this is something I've kind of been sounding the horn about for a little while now, not because I'm trying to scare anybody out of the game, but I really wanted people to understand what they were going to be getting themselves into at launch. You were not going to get a fully polished game, and Colossal Order had been relatively transparent about that. Steve was, I think, incredibly fair in his review and opinions on the game, and he even utilized some of the saves from City Planner plays and gave him a massive shout out. I think Steve's video is a really good watch, and I highly suggest you guys take a look at it if you're interested in learning anything about the performance of this game. He also went over pre-patch and post-patch because we did get that big patch on day 2 that severely increased performance for anyone operating on a computer over 1080p. So if you were experiencing performance issues before and you maybe were on a resolution like 1440p or 4K and you were just like, this is unplayable, seriously, give the game a shot again if you haven't since that update, because it seriously made a big difference for a lot of people. Anyways, I highly suggest you guys take a look at GamersNexus video here, and I will leave a link to it down in the description. It's also going to be really good for any of you who are unsure about whether or not your computer can handle the game, or if you are expecting certain performance targets, you can actually see what that is for your rig. And just a side note, as I'm approaching the 50,000 population mark in my city currently, I noticed that my CPU was starting to take a lot more of the load than the GPU was, and things were beginning to make that shift away from the GPU and into the CPU. On launch day, Colossal Order also dropped an official optimization and performance guide that kind of told you which settings to turn down and how to tune them. I'd actually suggest you guys take a look at TDW's unofficial guide instead. I think he had some better options for settings, and I highly suggest making sure that you have VSync turned off. Do not have that on. On Wednesday, Paradox did give an official performance post, kind of talking about what their post-release plans and goals are. They did state, "We want to assure you that the issues are not deeply rooted in the game's foundation, so we fully expect to be able to improve performance going forward." This also kind of aligns with the fact that they delayed console release. They do still plan on having a release for console, but the game needs to go through optimization steps first. This is something, again, that I have been sounding the horn on for a while. I do truly believe that we will see pretty significant performance increases across all hardware coming up to the console release. They have to get the game performing in a really good way in order for it to be able to be released on things like the Xbox and the PlayStation. Because the games are going to be the same on console as they are on PC, which is how we're able to actually use the modding workshop on console, they need to get these performance targets down. So they will happen eventually. So don't worry, PC players, performance will increase over time. Now, they did say in this article that they plan on adding other upscale options. Right now, they're just using FSR 1, but they did bring up FSR 2 and DLSS 2. They said currently with how they've built out the anti-aliasing, it's not really possible, but it is steps that they're working towards, and it does seem like they want to add both of those features long term. So those will significantly improve performance as well down the road. In this article is where they also stated that their performance target is actually 30 FPS and not 60 FPS. They said, "We just don't believe there will be a long-term benefit at setting the target to be 60 FPS. Which I don't necessarily disagree with, and I do think that resources might be better spent shifting teams to work on other things rather than just trying to improve performance all the way up to 60 FPS. This isn't an action shooter game. This isn't something like Starfield where it's like, man, I would really like to have a smooth 60 FPS experience here. This is a city builder at the end of the day. They also announced that they will be doing official weekly updates on what's being worked on to keep us all up to date. So don't worry, you can check all of those here in future videos. So make sure you guys have notifications turned on so you can keep up to date on all the Cities Skylines 2 news. Now, PC Gamer did publish an article kind of talking about much like what I did last week, where they actually discuss the level of detail of the actual Cims in the game and how they can cause performance issues. Now, I did get into the dev console, and I will have a video on how to do this and what are some of the cool things you can actually do in the dev console later. So again, make sure you guys have notifications turned on, subscriptions, all that good stuff. Drop a like while you're down there too, that'd be great. But when you go in there, you can actually just toggle off the visuals for all the Cims. So they'll still function and work in the background, and they'll still be doing their thing, but you just won't be able to see them. And I got nearly a 15 FPS performance increase. And something I noticed while messing around with this, and I believe they talk about in this article as well, is that when you zoom out, there is no distance change in the level of detail on the Cims. So even if you're about like 100 feet back, the sim does not lose any of its level of detail. It is still fully rendering all of these things about these characters. And it will do that until the character itself fully renders out. But at that point, you're zoomed so far back that you're rendering in so much other stuff like different buildings and trees and all sorts of other stuff that you don't really see the performance change. much. But when you go into Dev Console and actually turn off the visuals of the Sims, it is just night and day performance difference. I truly believe that optimizing these Sims and making sure that their distance rendering actually, goes into place will drastically improve performance. Again, I will have a video on the actual Dev Console later in the week so you guys can see how to turn this off and maybe get upwards of 10 to 15 FPS performance increase in some of the busiest parts of your city. Now, we did get the first patch on Thursday, which was 2 days after launch, that fixed a ton of stuff for higher resolution players. They also made a bunch of changes to some of the settings in the game, like some of the performance guides told you to turn off certain settings, and they actually fixed some of those settings, so there's some of them that you can turn back on. Now, that being said, I don't think that any of the things that were in TDW's guide, that's again in the description, really changed the visual fidelity of the game that much, so I would still stick to the guide for now. So not only did they optimize a bunch of these performance settings, they also fixed a bunch of the crashes. So if you experience crashes on day 1 and 2, you might not be experiencing them anymore. So make sure you definitely give it a shot. And if you guys have any bugs to report, please make sure you go to the link, which I will put in the description. That is for bug reporting. If you guys find something, so that way, especially if you can replicate it, then, they at least know that it's there. Now, if you haven't been following along with my content over the past several months where we've been breaking down all the developer diaries, there is a lot of things that are different, and I have been trying to explain a lot of these things to people who came into my Twitch stream, not understanding how certain things like the demand and everything else in the game works from Cities Skylines 1 to Cities Skylines 2. Colossal Order has an official tutorial series done by Timeister over on their YouTube channel. I will leave a link to that playlist down in the description. It is actually really solid. If you didn't watch any of the developer diaries or don't know anything about the new game, I highly suggest watching this because he does such a good job quickly and concisely explaining all of the new changes to the game and how they kind of work. Now, before we move on to the last big bit of news and I gotta give my thoughts on the game so far, I want to discuss one last thing, and that's the demand meter. This is more a tip rather than a news story, but it's something that I think is worth bringing up in this video because it is probably the question I answered the most in my live stream. A lot of people came in asking, how do I get other demand types? Everyone's just getting low density residential and they keep zoning it, and that's the problem. Stop zoning it. Stop giving your citizens low density residential. An important thing to realize about the demand meter in Cities Skylines 2 is that it is not a need meter. Just because your citizens are crying and begging for you to build low density housing doesn't mean that they need it. If you sit around and wait for them to stop complaining about low density housing, they'll start complaining about high density housing or even medium density housing. They want housing, and the first type of housing they're gonna beg for is low density housing. Why? Because it's spacious, and Sims love spacious housing. Over time, they'll become more okay with higher density housing, and then you'll be able to zone it. It's important to remember also that low density housing brings in families. So you'll have to compensate by building more elementary schools and high schools, and you'll have a new population of people moving into your city that will in turn need different types of housing as they grow up and get older, and they'll need different services. They'll also work in specific types of industries as well. So it's really important to make sure that you have diverse zonings. And if you want different zoning types, literally starve your citizens of housing. Create an artificial housing crisis, and they will become okay with high density housing. Remember, your demand meter is not a need meter, it is a want meter. The same thing can be said for commercial. I've been really bad about this, but in my city, there is a constant flashing error sign saying we need more customers coming from all my commercial buildings. But my demand meter at the bottom says, I'll build more commercial. That doesn't mean that the citizens need more commercial. There's other factors that go into the demand, like jobs. My citizens might just need jobs, and citizens will work in commercial. So, therefore, the city will build more commercial buildings if you allow it. That doesn't mean that it's the right decision for your city, and I would probably be better off building more offices rather than commercial, or just building more residential. Now, the last big bit of news is the 8 region packs that will be coming out with Paradox mods. I don't know if these will be ready exactly when Paradox mods is like fully done and out of early access and ready for us to actually access, but we will be getting 8 free regional packs that will come with the mod workshop for free officially from Cities Skylines, as they've worked with many creators to make these 8 regional packs. Now, this will all be for free. It will contain 2,500 different assets from 8 different regions. These will be available to all players, including Xbox and PS5 players, when the game comes out for your system, because these are asset mods, not code mods, and asset mods will be available for everyone, which is one of the big reasons why they wanted to make the move over to Paradox mods. The different regions are Japan, China, East and West Coast USA, the UK, Eastern Europe, France, and Germany. And again, these will all be available for free to kind of add a little bit of spice to our cities. I'll leave a link to the announcement video down in the description down below, but some of these assets that they already showed off look absolutely sick and will severely change how you develop your cities. Now, as I said before, I want to close off today's video talking about my thoughts and opinions on the launch and the actual game itself. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that the launch wasn't a little rocky. Performance was definitely not great, and the default settings gave, I think, the wrong opinion about how bad performance really is on this game. And while it's not great, I think if you change just a couple optimization settings, you would have noticed a much better performance from your game on any system. But I think from a Colossal Order's perspective, knowing that your performance is bad, they probably should have taken that into consideration before launching the game with the default settings that they had. As someone who's been following all of the Cities Skylines 2 news up until this point, I thought they were pretty transparent about what the performance issues were going to be like at launch. But you can't get to everyone, and it seems like a lot of people were completely blindsided by how bad performance actually was, and also just didn't take the time or know which settings to turn up and down. The default presets were also not that great, and Steve from GamersNexus also harped on them for that. There was also a bunch of content creators that said that they think that this game needed a little bit more time to cook in the oven. I don't fall into that camp. I'm excited that I finally have access to the game. It's something I've been looking forward to for a really long time, and I'll take the performance issues at launch because the core gameplay of it is just so good that I don't want to go back. It's not like Cities Skylines 1 is gone, and it's not like Colossal Order wasn't transparent about there potentially being issues at launch. I think to me, at the end of the day, this game should have been labeled an early access title, but released when it did. But at the end of the day, I'm having an absolute blast, and I think the game is absolutely fantastic, and the bones are seriously there to make a long-term, amazing product. Anyways, that's going to be it for this video. I want to thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. I'm live every Tuesday and Thursday over on Twitch. So if you guys want to chat, ask any questions, please feel free to come on over. Anyways, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Happy building.